Hi guys, welcome to another session of Life Matters. Really excited today. Why? Because we've got a new dad in our church, and he's going to be talking about not being a new parent, but about mental health. Fraser's studied for many years in psychology, and he's going to talk about that, talk about mental health and real life applications in his own life and in his own practice of what it means to bring mental health into a faith setting and how they offset each other. So really looking forward to hearing from Fraser.
Hi everybody, I am Fraser. I'm a member here at Althouse Community Church, and I live here in the south side of Glasgow with my wife and my newborn son of 4 months. I am just about to finish my counselling psychology doctorate here in Glasgow. I've been a student now for a number of years, and I'm very close to becoming a fully qualified psychologist. I've been a member here at ACC now for kind of 5 years, I would say. And before that I was at a church in Glasgow, and I actually lived in Prestwick down in Ayrshire for a little while, moved up here when I was 15 after moving school. So I've been a Christian since I was about probably 12, 13, 14, around that age. And it's a little vague for me when I actually kind of officially became a Christian, I suppose, because I was in a kind of church environment for a large part of my life. When I lived down in Prestwick, I went to church on a weekly basis. I attended a lot of different youth events. But I really think I came to faith around in my kind of early teens, when my faith became a really important part, became a real integral part of who I was. We had a youth worker at my original church that was quite helpful in kind of showing me what it meant to love Jesus, what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to actually have faith, and often that was a little bit different to what I thought Christianity was or what religion was. Often I kind of bought into that idea of a kind of doctrine faith that, you know, it was about repression and it was about restriction. And it wasn't until I actually understood what it meant to be a Christian that I felt so much more freer. And actually that's the kind of time that I feel that I really did come to Christ, and I became a Christian at that point. And since then, my understanding of Christian faith has always been about grace and love. And I think often it's easy to buy into the kind of this legalized mentality of what it means to be a Christian or what it means to be a follower of Jesus. But I know from personal experience that it's one of the most freeing, it's the most freeing thing that I have in my life, that's part of my life. And I always feel like I come back to God's love for me. And often I come to that point perhaps when I feel more distant from God, times when I maybe do things I shouldn't be doing, or I'm not as invested in my faith as much as I perhaps should be. Often that's when I see God's love the most, and I'm not advising that you distance yourself from God in order to experience His love, but I think it speaks to God's grace, that even in times when I'm distancing myself more from God, I experience His grace to a greater degree, and I attribute that a lot to things I've been through in my own life. I attribute that greatly to my family, you know, meeting my wife and having my new born son, having my career as well. All of these things were off the back of God's grace. It wasn't through direct effort from me, and I think sometimes we can get fooled by that, particularly as Christians as well. It was God's grace, it was God's love that showed me this way, that showed me the way to my family, that showed me the way to my career, even at times when things were at their hardest for me. You know, when I was growing up, I experienced quite a bit of difficulty in my school life, and I often felt quite ostracized. I felt like a victim in many ways. I felt persecuted, particularly kind of in social environments in school. And in some ways, my faith was kind of weaponized against me. And when I reflect on that a little bit, I think more about how my faith almost became like became something to hide from. You know, it was something that I didn't want to tell people about because it would be used against me in some ways. And it wasn't until I really became a Christian kind of in my earlier teens, when I really started to invest in my faith in God, that I realized that you know, faith is not something to hide from, it's not something to run away from, it's something to fully embrace. And as an adult now, you know, I still struggle with that, of course. That's something that is still a challenge. I'm sure it's a challenge for everybody. My job as a psychologist, or as soon to be a psychologist, I work a lot in mental health, and I work a lot with individuals, you know, couples as well, groups of people. And part of my job is to help support people, is to establish a connection with people, to help people through some of the most difficult times in their life. I think one of the things that is most consistent in all of the clients that I experience is feelings of isolation. It's feelings of loneliness, and maybe we've experienced that more during lockdown and coronavirus. It's also feelings of lack of purpose, and in so many ways, I think we gain those kind of things through God, from God. You know, we obtain purpose, we obtain meaning, we obtain connection and a relationship. So many things that people lack. And you know, I have some clients that externally might seem extremely successful, people who do well in business, or people who have done well in academia, or you know, people that have big families, things that other people might deem as success. Yet there is something missing, and often you know, we hear that term, that kind of God-shaped hole, and I see that in so many people that I work with. That lack of purpose, that lack of meaning is profound in so much of mental health. And I think in many ways what I do is mirrored a little bit in what my relationship with God is like. God comes for the broken, God comes for the ones that are in need, God comes for the ones that are suffering. And often in my work and in my studies, I've really drawn parallels between what I do in mental health and what my relationship with God is like, or what being a Christian is like for me. And often in mental health literature and psychological literature, when they talk about working in mental health, the importance of the therapeutic relationship is number one. It is the thing that causes positive change. It's the thing that supports people the most effectively. And often I think we can get caught up in thinking that, you know, mental health work or psychological work is all about theory and research and different techniques, and it's not. Although those kind of things come into play, it is about the development of the relationship. And often throughout my studies, I've drawn parallels to that with God. It's not about the things that I do. It's not about the things that I do or don't do. It's about the connection between me and God. It's about that relationship. The development of that relationship between you and Christ is what's paramount. And I think I really see parallels between my work and what I think Christianity is really all about. It wasn't until I actually accessed therapy myself that I realized that this was something that I could invest in. This felt like something that was more interpersonal. It was a relationship. It was between people. It was about establishing connection, and that was something I had always valued and I'd always been quite good at. And so I decided to kind of pursue work in therapy, and that led me to further degrees. And I did quite well in my psychology degree, and then I managed to get onto a doctorate, a combined master's, and do quite well there too. There was nothing that I was doing that was particularly beneficial for me in academia. I wasn't excelling, I wasn't working hard enough. I was struggling, and I've always struggled in my academic life. But I've seen through those years about how God in many ways has dragged me through it by the ankle, kicking and screaming more often than not. I know often people think of people on doctorates and they think, gosh, they must be really intelligent, or they must have done really well in school, or they must be this or they must be that. And for me, so much of that isn't the case as such. You know, I didn't do particularly well, yet I'm in this position, this really fortunate position. And I keep coming back to those two pillars that I spoke of earlier about love and grace of God. And it's those two pillars that have got me to this point now, from a child in primary school who really didn't have a clue what was going on, suffering from dyslexia, to now be in a position where I'm close to qualifying as a doctor of psychology. I can only attribute that to grace.
Hi there, and we hope you've enjoyed listening to Fraser share his story about his own faith in God and how he relates that faith to his work as a psychologist working with people with mental health challenges. Fraser emphasized two pillars that his faith is based on: the pillars of grace and love. Grace is undeserved favor. Love is unconditional acceptance, and how he's come to experience that from God, and how he tries to demonstrate and show that in his work and his relationship with others. In the Bible, one of the writers in the New Testament, St. Paul, who wrote almost half of the books of the New Testament, talks about grace and love every time he writes a letter to someone. He starts or he finishes his letter with these words, grace and love to you. And in these sessions, these Life Matters sessions, we hope that you too will find the grace of God, the favor of God, and the love of God to be realities in your life. Fraser also talked about a therapeutic relationship. Therapeutic simply means to be healed from a disease, and how he seeks to help people and walk with people and journey with people and help them find that healing in their lives. And we believe that's what God wants for you too. Whatever you might be struggling with, he wants you to have a therapeutic relationship with him, and that comes from receiving grace and love into your life. I'm Don Palmer. Thanks for joining us for another Life Matters session.
Father God, thank you that you promise to be with us through all of life's storms, that you bring peace when we feel overwhelmed with anxious thoughts, that you bring hope when we feel dragged down by despair and depression, that you bring healing to our minds, our bodies and our souls. So I ask that those who are struggling with mental health issues, that you surround them with people who will bring them support and the comfort that they need. I ask this in your name. Amen.